¿Es verdad que el rapero YNW MELLY acabó con sus dos mejores amigos? ¿Es verdad que se intentó escapar en pleno juicio? Y si recibe la pena, ¿podrá decir sus últimas palabras? Y por último, ¿pinta su caso bien o mal? Pues vamos con el día 6. Si no has visto los resúmenes de todos los últimos días, claramente los tienes que ver para comprender todo esto en detalle. También te recuerdo que si quieres pertenecer exclusivamente a la Trippy Gang, solo tienes que suscribirte y te regalaré un Bugatti. Recuerda que sonreír es gratis y si te quieres echar unas risas y verme analizar este caso en directo, estoy siempre por Twitch, así que espero verte por ahí. Y ahora vamos para adentro.
To suggest that, okay, there are a lot of things that we could have done and we didn't do, and if you ask about it, we're going to go do it and introduce it while the proceedings ensue, is not only an ambush, but it's an insult to the process. They're saying that they have the evidence. Now, the state can get up there and say, hey, the defense is making some ridiculous cross-examination and we don't have everything because what we have is enough, which is when they bring an indictment of this nature, or any indictment, they're saying we have enough now, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Creo que de lo que se está quejando ahora mismo es que también en el vídeo anterior lo comenté, es que han introducido información a última hora que no ha sido aprobado del todo, razón por la cual básicamente se está quejando.
As these proceedings go forward, continue to investigate and plug holes that we reveal to exist as the process goes on until this case goes to verdict. I'm not quite sure when this would end or how there is even a gatekeeping function of the court if there is no gate and there is no fence and there are no lines and no parameters of propriety. The state is making a representation by bringing this indictment that they are ready and they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if that proof beyond a reasonable doubt also includes areas of investigation that were not pursued, then they should explain to a jury why it was not pursued and why the failure to pursue it does not undermine their case. They don't get to keep plugging holes as the proceedings go forward.
Conclusión, lo que está diciendo es que a lo largo del juicio hay aún muchísimos huecos por cubrir, básicamente falta de información, razón por la cual él también solicitó, esta persona exactamente, el abogado de Melly solicitó la cancelación del juicio, la moción, y aún así dice que siguen sacando información que no es relevante. Por cierto, quiero decir una cosa que vamos a ver ahora, que es muy importante. No han encontrado huellas de Melly en la escena de crimen. Hablo del coche. He visto antes ya el título del vídeo, me he visto unos segundos, así que ahora también lo veremos en detalle, que también claramente viene a cuento y es muy importante porque si no hay evidencias, que ¿cómo ha sido? ¿Qué ha sucedido?
My thought is that the discovery cutoff, you can keep investigating the case whatever, however you feel fit, and it doesn't mean that anything you find can be used at trial as in evidence.
Ojo lo que acaba de decir, ha dicho no sirve coger cualquier cosa y simplemente meterla en el juicio así por la cara. Es decir, cualquier cosa que encuentres, no meterla así corriendo porque a lo mejor ni siquiera viene a cuento. Ojo que esto es muy importante, porque tú puedes meter aquí cualquier tipo de información que ni siquiera sea importante y sea válida para defender a Melly o acusar a Melly en este caso.
And I'm finding it to be a discovery violation. I just think the only way that you'd be cured is he's not going to testify about this second procedure that happened. Same thing if you want to keep...
Ojo que ha habido aquí una violación respecto a las evidencias. O sea que aquí alguien, por lo que estoy entendiendo, los federales han metido cosas y no han cumplido la palabra como tal. Eso es lo que estoy diciendo. En el primer vídeo también lo dije. Han metido información en el último momento que no ha sido aceptado por ambos lados y también tiene que ser revisado y todo. Entonces, tronco, has tenido 4 años para meter la información, la metes en el último segundo, pues yo puedo comprender que no sea aceptada.
Using new discovery that you're coming in, I think the cutoff needs to be happened because this is what's going on. We're going to have this. If you find something new, there's a whole, as counsel describes it,
La evidencia eran los mapas. Es que acabo de subir el vídeo, mirároslo. Es el tema de los mapas y el movimiento de los móviles. La cosa es que no han podido verificar si los móviles, hablo en plural porque eran los móviles de Williams y de YNW MELLY, y no han podido confirmar que eran de ellos. Que sí, que han traqueado móviles, pero que no hay una prueba exacta que diga este es el móvil de Melly. Entonces, sin esa prueba, pues yo entiendo perfectamente que pues no la acepte como tal. La evidencia hasta ahora no confirma que YNW MELLY estaba en la escena de crimen.
He is testifying as to where the phones are located. And that does not necessarily mean this is where Melly was. This does not mean that is where he was at, exactly. We know that he was already in the car, right? We saw him getting in the car at the beginning when they were leaving the recording studio.
Eso son lo de las cámaras de seguridad que pueden verificar que Melly se metió efectivamente en el coche.
The issue here is, when did he leave that car prior to the victims getting shot? If he did leave the car before the victims were shot, and so we're looking at the time frames here, not necessarily was he there, was he or not.
There are a lot of pieces of the puzzle in this case. The surveillance video.
Eso os dice, hay tantas piezas en el puzzle que no concuerdan, que hace toda esta historia super weird.
Why did the DA, meaning the district attorney in Florida, it's the state attorney in that county, put this prosecutor on such a high-profile case?
Well, sometimes you get the luck of the draw. I mean, I think this prosecutor probably prepared for this case, but she wasn't prepared for, I think, a defense team that really does have all of the information that they need to proceed forward.
Lo acaba de decir ella mismo que está ahí presente. Ella acaba de decir de que la federal que se preparó para este caso no sabía que el equipo de YNW MELLY tenía tanta información potente y valiosa que iba a ir en contra de ella, porque cada información que aporta ella, me refiero con ella a federal, en contra de Melly, la arrebatan, y encima el abogado de Melly, lo que he dicho antes, viene con muchísima información en contra. Entonces el equipo de Melly es muy tocho, yo lo he dicho ya.
The defense is not making it easy for the prosecution. They are doing their homework, they are putting in the cases, and I think the prosecutor is doing the best she can with what she has. I think the biggest mistake, Anjanette, that she's made so far is to not turn over the discovery. You mentioned it before, it's an unforced error. It's something that probably someone who is new would be doing. I don't know how long she has been in that prosecutorial office, but frankly, I think that was probably her biggest mistake, and hopefully she'll learn from that.
Because we don't try cases by surprise anymore, like you would see on TV and maybe the old Perry Mason shows. Everything is regulated. Prosecution has to turn over all items, and you'd be surprised at how many cases, Anjanette, they do not. That's why we have innocent people that are convicted, and we find 20 years later that there was something in the file that was exculpatory, which means that the person was not guilty. So there can be no surprise witness, but if a new witness came in that no one would have an idea would be coming in, then the prosecution would still have to give notice, and the defense would have time to prepare for that witness, but that's usually not the case.
Vale, lo que acaba de decir es que si viene algo de sorpresa, de por sí hoy todo no es en sorpresa, como ella acaba de decir. Si hay algo de sorpresa, le tienen que dejar el tiempo al otro lado para que se prepare para esa evidencia en caso de que haya algo, o testimonio en caso de que vaya una persona a entrevistar y preguntar y tal.
If Melly does get sentenced to death, will he have a chance to speak his last words for the courtroom for his fans?
Oh.
I think that he definitely will be able to do that. That's up to the court. The judge will make some, words and allow for him to be able.
Dice, en caso de que reciba la pena, de que lo más seguro es que diga sus últimas palabras. Buah. ¿Cuáles serían sus últimas palabras? No me lo quiero ni imaginar.
But the first threshold is getting over if he's going to be found guilty, and that's where we are now. And if he is, then we move on to that step. And if that is the case in the sentencing or anything at that time frame, then the court will make the announcement that allows for him to be able to have any last words, wants to say anything to his fans or to his family.
Is to get information from the car, that car was at the scene. The cell phone data just means the cell phone was at the scene. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even mean Melly was at the scene, because...
Ojo con lo que acaba de decir de que el móvil estaba en la escena, pero ¿cómo demuestras que Melly estaba exactamente ahí? Una cosa es que estaba el móvil ahí y otra cosa es que tenías el móvil encima y Melly estaba ahí. Son dos cosas totalmente diferentes.
The phone could have been carried by anyone else, so I definitely don't think that it's a problem anything Melly may have said at this point, because the prosecution hasn't proven that Melly was at the crime scene, that he was holding the phone, or that he was in the car. The only thing they are showing right now is the location of the cell phone, all of the cell phones, frankly. And so I think we do have a ways to go to actually say that Melly is the one who did the shooting, he had the gun, he was in the car. Long way to go before that.
Will the jury look at YNW MELLY behavior, happy, giggling, goofing around, etc., and take...
¡Wow! No sabía que iban a meter esta pregunta. Esta pregunta es muy interesante. Bueno, ya lo habréis visto por todos los vídeos que he hecho. Míratelos. A Melly le hemos visto reírse muchísimas veces, cantar, moverse, rezar, y acaban de preguntar si todo esto le puede afectar.
Will the jury take it in a negative way, Bridget?
Well, we never know what jurors are thinking. However, as a defense counsel, it's our job really to let the defendant know before a trial, before a hearing, before any matters before the court, to take it seriously and to make sure that they are on their best behavior. Melly has been quite the character throughout this entire trial. He mouths words to people in the audience. He says prayers. He gives kisses in the air. I believe he was said on his...
Este fue el momento en el que se olió el traje, porque supuestamente olía mal. O sea, literalmente te está jugando la vida. ¡La vida! Solo vives una vez. Y el tío se pone a reírse, a hacer tonterías, o se pone a rezar. Hay incluso un vídeo que se ha hecho viral en TikTok donde el tío se empieza a pasear y se acerca a la puerta. Y viene un policía a ponerse en medio y ponían de título YNW MELLY se quería escapar. No sé si lo habéis visto, pero este tío es que es un personaje.
Social media that he was giving kisses to angels is what he said on his social media. And so if I was his defense counsel, I would have nudged him at that very moment to stop it, right, at that time. I also would have had a conversation.
Han cortado justo el vídeo en el que se empieza a reír.
With him prior to trial to make sure that he is being in a serious manner, that he's also showing that he's taking this seriously. You just don't want the jurors to think anything differently. You want them to make sure that
Ahí incluso decían que estaba lanzando gang signs, pero estaba haciendo un corazón.
they think that this is serious to him. I mean, he's being tried for a double murder case and, you know, could be sent to death here. And so it's a very serious offense.
And they do have to come to a unanimous decision on both of these murder counts that we have first degree for Melly. And so if you don't have, you know, all of them agreeing, and it can take time, you know, these types of things, sometimes the judge has to go back and say, look, it may seem as though you have lots of questions. It may seem as though you can't come to a decision, and he might give a charge saying, go back and see if you can come to one kind of conclusion. So right now we are nowhere near the, you know, deliberation phase, but if they actually do start deliberating and if they do become hung and that charge doesn't address the situation, then that could mean that there is a mistrial, and a mistrial simply means that they could start all over again. The prosecution would have the ability to make the decision as to whether...
O sea, si el jurado, o sea, las personas del jurado no saben qué decisión tomar y el juez también está indeciso por lo visto, pueden hacer el juicio todo otra vez.
Do you think Cortland will take the stand and snitch on Melly? Is Bortland a state witness in the case? Will he have his own trial? So yes, he's going to have his own trial. I answered part of that, but Linda, the rest...
O sea, Bortland va a tener su propio juicio completamente aparte de Melly.
Will he snitch? Now, remember, he could be a witness, but I would imagine that if he gets on the stand and decides to snitch, right, what's the defense going to do?
Oye, ¿os imagináis que ahora hay un switch enorme en todo el juicio y Bortland sale y dice, ha sido Melly? Y lo se chiva y lo dice todo. ¡Dios, la que se liaría! ¡Dios!
What did you do? You found God when it was decided that you had to have your own trial in your own death penalty case, and now you want to talk about YNW Melly? You didn't say that before. You didn't say that before you got a deal, and the deal saves your life, not his, doesn't it? And there you go. The defense really has a lot to work with. So my impression is no, he won't take the stand, even though the prosecution may decide they need him because they're losing the jury.
Vale, pues no van a entrevistar a Bortland porque se juega en el cuello, dicen.
You don't have a witness who can say, I was there, I saw exactly what happened. So to that extent, it is a weak case. But if they do it correctly, they can put...
Lo acaba de decir ella misma. Es un caso débil como tal, por falta de información.
Forensics in. I mentioned this before, but they need to make sure they have the phone data. They need to make sure that they have any sort of cameras that might have been outside to view the cars. They need to get the information from the cars to see where the cars went. And so I think if they put all of that forensic data together and they do it well and they analyze it, they can pinpoint what exactly happened. You know, as far as the car, we do have the video of the individuals getting into the car. And what the prosecution is claiming is, yes, you're right, we have Melly in the back, and he's in the back behind the driver. We have Christopher Thomas, who's in the back on the passenger side. And we have Anthony, he is in the front on the passenger side. And they have Henry as the driver. So that is what the prosecution is claiming. And they're going to have to prove that with the forensic evidence that they have. And so far, that's what they're putting in. And I think it's really, I wouldn't say it's a weak case. I would say it's a difficult case.
Vale, ya dice que no es un caso débil, sino que es un caso difícil. Hombre, caso interesante, uff. Es un caso delicado, interesante y difícil. De todas maneras, boys, por supuesto que siempre os mantengo aquí actualizado al día de todo. Si no habéis visto todos los vídeos acerca del caso, siempre estáis haciendo preguntas. ¿Ha sido o no ha sido? Verse los vídeos completos al detalle y así sabréis si ha sido o no. Así que muchísimas gracias como siempre y os deseo un fantástico día.